Good morning, it's Gary Sly. Welcome to Flosstube number 4 of the Legacy of Handmade Objects. I'm back from my travels this week, and here in the shop, giving a little bit of an homage to Halloween with my beaver skin top hat this morning. Talk a little bit about this. Got a bunch of things I want to talk about today. I want to get into the legacy of cooking a little bit more and talk about a few objects there. Gonna talk some about the value of travel and the interest that I have in that. Gonna show off some cross-stitch pieces, and then I want to look just very briefly at a shop that I visited at the end of our time together today. As always, thanks for those of you who are out there who have subscribed to my channel. It's very humbling to know that anybody wants to pay any attention to what I've got to say for a few minutes. It's very exciting for me to come back and kind of see what's new and talk a little bit about what's important to me at this point. I do intend to, over the next few months, give you quite a bit of a tour of the shop. I've hesitated to do that just yet. Thought it might be good to kind of get some preliminary stuff out of the way first. All right, I've worn this top hat about as long as I'm going to wear it, so that's it for my Halloween. But I did want to talk just a minute about this wonderful old hat. It's a beaver skin top hat made from real beaver skin. I'm sure it was made by hand. It's got all the markings of having been made in London, probably in the 1890s. It has a wonderful old leather hat box that goes with it, with a sticker from the Grand Hotel in Paris. So undoubtedly the owner of this hat was doing the grand tour of Europe. Someone of means who would have, as a young man, and we know this was a man because of the hat, have taken a tour of the major capitals of Europe. It's interesting that I found out who actually owned this hat. It was owned by a young man who later became a fairly well-known artist named Frederick William Bock, B-O-C-K. On the bottom of the hat box, he has written his initials and last name, F.W. Bock, and mentioned that at that point he was living in New York State. I looked up Bock, and he is well known for especially some of his drawings that depict rabbits in kind of human and lifelike situations. But it's just another example of things that we might buy today that we don't think too much about how they're made. But this is kind of a throwback to that wonderful period of time when people wore hats, when gentlemen would have worn a top hat to any sort of formal event. And we also know that beaver skins and the pelt industry were some of the ways that the early frontier actually made a lot of money and brought new settlers to this country. So this little hat, probably 120, 130 years old at this point, holds a lot of history with it. So I'll kind of lay that aside for a minute. A couple weeks ago, before my trip, I said a little bit of something about cooking and mentioned that for me, one of the handmade tasks or exciting things that we do, it does include cooking. Cooking and creating foods might not be quite as permanent, but I know because of the great cooks in my family that some of the recipes and some of the things that they used to fix are recipes that I've spent the rest of my life trying to recreate. And so I do want to include cooking as I talk about the legacy of handmade objects, the smells, the tastes, the memories that go along with that, especially as we're heading into the holidays. One of my favorite artifacts from my own family is this hand-turned wooden bowl. It was owned by my great-grandmother Lucy. Her name was Lucy Settles Cawley. We know this is hand-turned. You can tell it just kind of by the way the markings and the way it was done. And I'm sure that Grandma Lucy spent many, many cold mornings in Virginia putting the dough together and getting some buttermilk biscuits ready for her family. And that's what I use this bowl for. I have a couple of old family recipes for buttermilk biscuits. and I use Grandma Lucy's bowl whenever I can. It's significant for me to say this, and I'll probably bring it up many times over the months. When somebody uses an object like this, it's not only a memory, but their physical presence in the form of DNA lingers on these objects for a very long time. I haven't checked to see how long DNA lasts, but I like to think that Grandma Lucy's DNA is still a part of this, and when I get ready to make buttermilk biscuits, I'm working in the legacy that Grandma Lucy might have created. She was an Irish, descended from Irish immigrants, lived in the mountains of Virginia. While I'm talking about cooking, I want to share a recipe today. It's one of my favorites, and it's one of the easiest that I know of. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, whose name was Mabel, and who I called Mama's, was just one of those tremendous cooks that everybody talked about. I learned to cook from her in large part. My mother hated cooking and didn't want to have much to do with it. She had a few recipes that she liked, but Mama's was the cook in the family, and her old-fashioned recipes were just favorites of mine. One of my favorites that everybody who knows me has probably had at some point is her fruit cobbler. And she called it cup of cobbler because the recipe was just that simple. Basically, all of the ingredients revolve around a cup of something. So you take a cup of flour. I would use self-rising flour, but if you want to use plain flour and add baking soda and powder as you like, that's up to you. But 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of sugar. Generally, what I do is kind of mix those together a bit so that they're a little more refined in the final dough. Add a cup of milk. Back in the day, Mama's would have used a full cup of butter. I don't like to use that much butter, so I cut it in half and just use a half a stick of butter. So what I do, take that half a stick of butter, put it in a deep dish baking dish, sort of a casserole dish, melt the butter in the oven at 325. Once the butter is melted, I mix it in with the flour, the sugar, and the milk. Make a nice little batter, pour that back into the baking dish, and then a cup of whatever your favorite fruit is, or maybe more than a cup if you like it to be a little indulgent, would be the last step. I like to buy the already made pie filling. It's yummy and it's easy, but you can use fresh fruit. You can cut up fruit and cook it in sugar on top of the stove yourself. You really can add just about any kind of filling you like, and all you do is dump that on top of the batter in the middle of the baking dish, and when the cobbler is completed, the batter will rise up above and kind of create this wonderful dome. You cook it at 325 until the top is nice and brown and it doesn't jiggle too much. And there's not not too many other ways I know to tell you how to tell if it's done. It takes a while because you're cooking it slow at 325. I would guess at least probably 45 minutes. You can stick a toothpick down in the side if you want to see if it's nice batter or not. So enjoy cup of cobbler sometime if you get the chance. Last week when I was up in Kentucky, I said something about stitching with respect to traveling, and I mentioned at that time that I love to collect pieces when I travel. I brought a few in to just kind of show this morning, just to kind of talk a little bit about this. This is a letter from the Book of Kells, which is a Celtic piece done by monks in Ireland. We went to Trinity College in Dublin, where the Book of Kells was on display, and this is the letter G, a stylized letter G from that trip. Also, somewhere along the lines in my travels in the British Isles, I got a hold of the Welsh dragon, and these are pieces that I've stitched. Right now they're just laying around, but my goal, I think, with these, rather than try to frame them individually, is probably to create some kind of a quilt to commemorate my travels. Booker T. Washington grew up very near where I did in the mountains of Virginia. There's a recreated cabin and a wonderful little area there. Whoops, no, that's not Booker T. That's Abraham Lincoln. Let me grab Booker T here. Booker T. Washington. I'll come back to Abe Lincoln. But this log cabin represents the slave cabin where Booker T. Washington would have been born. Funny story there. We were rambling around and my mother stepped into one of these cabins on the site, and there was a big old black snake about 10 feet long up on the wall, and she backed out of that cabin pretty quickly. This one I already showed you, but this is Abraham Lincoln's birthplace up in Kentucky. What I like about doing these kind of pieces is that it's pretty easy for me to remember who I was with and what I was doing and what sort of wonderful time I had when I purchased these kits. This is from a historic home down in Miami, and I'm gonna forget the name of it right now, but some of you I'm sure already know where I'm talking about. I bought this little piece when I was visiting my son in Germany a couple years back, just a quick little piece. The problem was I had traveled to Germany and I didn't have any cross stitch with me, so I had to find something to do while we were exploring. This is one of my favorites. This is Falling Water, the Frank Lloyd Wright house up in western Maryland. Pretty quick little stitch, but a lot of fun there. And I mentioned Frank Lloyd Wright a couple weeks ago. I love his designs, and I love doing cross stitch. And then the final one I have here today is this cross stitch representing the JFK Library and other sites of Boston area. Sites that I've visited many times and which I love to remember. So I brought these in to encourage you to look for kits when you're traveling, and if you find things that you like, go ahead and stitch them. You may not do anything with them right away, but they're wonderful memories that you can hold on to, pass along, perhaps frame, or perhaps put into some other kind of pillow or finish that'll help you remember those travels. If you've been watching over the last couple weeks, you know I made a trip up into the Midwest. I visited the burial sites of 4 presidents, did all kinds of wandering around, which is one of my favorite things to do in the whole world. And another favorite thing is to visit cross-stitch and needlepoint shops when I'm traveling. I had the chance to go to a little town just outside of downtown Indianapolis called Zionville in Indiana. I visited there with the owner of Persnickety Stitchers. A wonderful little shop. I would encourage you to go and spend the day in Zionville. We had a great lunch. We wandered around and looked at all the pumpkins and the harvest decorations, visited a couple bookstores. Zionville by itself is a wonderful place, but of course I had to bring some things back to the shop, and there were some unique surface embroidery patterns that I hadn't seen and that I didn't have in my shop. So these are great Needle Delights originals. You've got one that's got it's hard to see this with the glare, but it's got Thanksgiving and fall themes. You've got one that's called Harvest Time that has grapes. And then we've got a nice Holiday Delights 4th of July patriotic one. I've recently decided that surface embroidery is my latest passion. So I've got a couple projects that I'll be showing you as I work on those over the coming months. The final thing that I did when I was at Persnickety's is I bought some of this DMC Floche, F-L-O-C-H-E. I've had a hard time getting it from any of the distributors that I typically work with, but the owner up at Persnickety's had some, so I bought a couple of short skeins in holiday colors, thinking that I'll use them for some of the projects that I've got going on for the holidays, but also maybe seeing if my patrons are interested in me stocking more of this DMC Floche. If you know anything about it, or if you have comments about how it is to stitch with, I'd love to hear. The owner said it stitches up quite nicely with cross-stitch projects. But it's a new product for me, and so I'm just kind of learning and figuring out what's happening there. Well, you've wasted another perfectly good 15 minutes listening to what I've got going on. I hope if you're not already a subscriber, that you'll push that button and follow what's going on here in the shop. Gary Lee Sly Fabric Arts. I'll be starting to decorate for the holidays and get ready for all kinds of excitement coming up, and I hope to be able to share that with you. As always, I value the legacy of the handmade objects that surround us, and I hope that we are creating a legacy that we're passing on to others. Have a safe Halloween, have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.